Chapter 23. Throughout the rest of the afternoon, I found myself trapped in a dreadful mood. Concentration eluded me, and I struggled to focus on anything at all. The sight of Brian for the second day in a row had left me unsettled. The bond between us hummed incessantly, rendering the simplest tasks increasingly challenging. Adding to my distress was the lingering threat he had made, hanging over me like a dark cloud. The thought of him possessing the power to obliterate the hotel we had painstakingly saved, the precious gift from Carmela to Valentine and me, filled me with a fierce protectiveness. We had poured our hearts into resurrecting this place from its ruins, breathing life back into its very walls. I refused to stand idly by and watch him snatch it away from us. However, the harsh reality remained. In a city where outlaws held sway, my defiance meant little against him. To say I wasn't worried would be a blatant lie. Anxiety gnawed at me relentlessly. Margaret, Zelda, and I had poured years of tireless effort into rebuilding this establishment. The mere thought of him threatening its destruction ignited a fiery rage within me. Yet, amidst the turmoil, one nagging question persisted. Would he truly go so far as to destroy the sanctuary, to harm the very business of his own mate, simply because I refused to yield to his demands? "Ah, Mommy," Valentine's concerned voice pierces through my distracted thoughts, prompting me to lift my head and meet his gaze. A startled shriek escapes me as I realize the grilled cheese I had been cooking was now burning. Smoke billows from the grill, and I rush over in a panic, yanking the tray out with bare hands, forgetting in my haste that it was scalding hot and I hadn't put on oven gloves. My fingers sizzle upon contact, and I instinctively drop the tray before racing to the sink, turning on the tap to let cold water soothe the searing pain. "Carol, don't touch that," I caution her firmly as she reaches out from the kitchen table towards the hot tray. She obediently withdraws her hand, and Zelda rushes in, drawn by the commotion. As if on cue, the smoke alarms blare loudly, adding to the chaos. Zelda quickly opens the window above the sink, then grabs a tea towel to fan the smoke out into the open air. "Shoot, Jane. Are you okay?" I nod, holding my hand under the cool water. My fingertips blistered while Zelda used the tea towel and picked up the tray, placing it on the stove and discarding the ruined grilled cheese. She then uses the broom to smack the fire alarm, jabbing the button and cutting off its deafening noise. "Let me see," Zelda insists, peering over my shoulder at the injured hand. "It's fine. It'll heal," I reassure her, though the pain throbs relentlessly. She clicks her tongue disapprovingly. "You've been distracted all afternoon. What's going on with you today?" I steal a glance at the small dining table in our cramped kitchen. The kids have returned to their drawings, seemingly oblivious to our turmoil. "He came by again today," I confess to Zelda, feeling the weight of her concern heavy in the air. She lets out a resigned sigh, running her fingers through her hair in frustration. I knew she feared I might follow in Carmela's footsteps. Both she and Margaret had repeatedly voiced their desire for me to mate with another rogue, fearing for my safety. But the prospect of a mate didn't stir any longing within me. I cherished my independence and felt complete on my own. Yet, I couldn't deny the impact of the bond. "You need to figure something out. Last night, you were restless, pacing all night, and now you're burning yourself. Go for a run. Val always told you to run it off." Seeing him always weakened her. "The more you see him, the more fragile you'll become," Zelda advises, chewing her thumbnail anxiously as she watches me. Zelda's words strike a chord, reminding me of the toll Carmela's encounters with the Alpha took on her. She would be incapacitated for days afterward, barely able to drag herself out of bed. But that couldn't be happening to me, not yet at least. Carmela had endured decades before her deterioration reached such a fatal point. The memory sends a shiver down my spine. "Go on, you know you should. When was the last time you unshifted?" Zelda's question hangs in the air, a gentle yet firm reminder of what I needed to do. I offer a nonchalant shrug, unable to recall the last time I allowed myself to shift. The truth was, I loathed shifting. It served as a painful reminder of the gradual erosion of my wolf side, each transformation leaving me feeling smaller and weaker. But I understood its necessity. Without shifting, my mental and physical well-being would deteriorate rapidly. Carmela had emphasized this to me when she was still able, insisting that shifting helped stave off the worst effects of the bond. Oh, how I missed her. Carmela was irreplaceable, a beacon of strength and wisdom. She would have made a remarkable grandmother if fate had been kinder. But Alpha Kalen's actions robbed her of that chance, and I harbored an unforgiving resentment towards him. I refused to let history repeat itself with his son. Brian wouldn't be the end of me, and he certainly wouldn't harm my son. I would ensure it no matter the cost. Go ahead, you can fill me in later when the kids are tucked in, Zelda encourages me, her tone gentle but insistent. I nod in agreement, glancing over at our children. Valentine's intense gaze remains fixed on his drawing, his amber eyes reflecting his deep concentration. His tongue peeks out from the corner of his mouth in a familiar gesture of focus. Zelda places a glass of juice on the table beside him, and I watch as he regards it with a critical eye. His lips purse, brows furrowed in concentration, before he carefully moves it onto the coaster, mirroring the action with Carol's glass. It's a small gesture, but one that speaks volumes about his meticulous nature. Meanwhile, his pencils are meticulously arranged in a neat row, each one sharpened to the same precise length. In contrast, Carol's supplies lay scattered, her fingers likely itching to straighten them for her. I can't help but admire the subtle ways in which my son looks out for his sister, and in the smallest of details. Sorry, Valentine, I forgot. Zelda laughs softly before ruffling his thick dark hair. He looks like his father, a spitting image, and I sometimes notice this particular stare. It was clear there was power in him. He already had a particular atmosphere about him. He was an alpha in the making, and I wasn't sure it would remain hidden. One day someone would notice he wasn't like other rogues. He was born from alpha parents. Even though I no longer had an aura, he was strong and dominant. His personality is quite intense for a child. Carol was like any child. Though she looked like Zelda, I could see her father in her too. Carol had his dark blonde hair and brown eyes, though her soft facial features and her nose she got from her mother. Jane, go. The kids are fine, Zelda tells me, and I nod. I felt like I was failing my son. I hardly had time, and I hated spending it away from my son when I did. I felt so spread thin, always racing around the hotel and lacking the energy to function by the afternoon, always working, building our village and his future. I plan a tender kiss on Valentine's cheek before making my way around the table to grab my sneakers. Can I come? Valentine's hopeful voice tugs at my heartstrings, and for a moment I'm tempted to say yes. He always enjoys watching me shift, unaware of the stark contrast between my weakened form and that of a regular werewolf. How could he know, when I'm the only one he's ever witnessed? But lately, the reservations about taking him along have grown stronger. Recent activity among the Forsaken, rogue wolves who've forsaken their packs, has made venturing beyond the city's borders increasingly perilous. Although the border patrols swiftly dispatch any intruders, the mere presence of these rogue elements fills me with unease. Since the last reported encounter, I've been hesitant to venture out, especially with Valentine in tow. The indifference of the packs toward rogues only exacerbates our apprehension. They may not care about our safety, but their tightened patrols indicate a shared concern, the city's security. It's clear that allowing rogue elements to infiltrate would spell trouble for everyone involved. Additionally, reports of Forsaken wolves disappearing, particularly those lingering near the city's borders and exhibiting feral behavior, add another layer of mystery to the situation. Something sinister is afoot, and I can't shake the feeling of impending danger. The disappearance of the Forsaken wolves had become an unsettling topic of conversation among the rogue community. Despite vigilant monitoring, they seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. In a city fueled by gossip, it was strange that there was no mention of these incidents in the news. It was as if they were being purposefully ignored, swept under the rug. But we knew better. We had heard the rumors, felt the chill of fear creeping through our ranks. While those aligned with packs were offered alternative routes and increased patrols for their safety, no such provisions were extended to us rogues. It was a stark reminder of our marginalized status within the city. Even though our community was small, when one of our own went missing, we felt the impact keenly. The absence of a fellow rogue, a cleaner at the hotel, weighed heavily on our hearts, especially knowing she left behind twin daughters. The thought of those poor girls left orphaned was enough to stir a deep sense of compassion within us. Thankfully, their grandmother had stepped in to care for them, but the burden of their mother's disappearance still loomed large. We made sure to continue supporting them, ensuring that their grandmother received the wages owed to her and offering whatever assistance we could. Despite the city's indifference, we refused to forget one of our own. The tension among the rogue community had reached a fever pitch. With 11 individuals disappearing in the past year alone, coupled with numerous sightings of forsaken wolves and 3 more forsaken vanishing without a trace, it was a troubling trend. Never before had so many gone missing in such a short span of time. The uncertainty of it all sent shivers down my spine. It felt as though the world itself was spiraling into chaos, and I couldn't shake the fear that gripped me. Not today, sweetie. I promise next time, I assure Valentine, but his disappointment is evident as he pouts. None of that. Your mother has her reasons, Zelda reprimands gently as Valentine glares at the table, his frustration palpable as he slams down his pencil. All she does is work, Valentine mutters, his words stabbing at my heart like a knife. I promise, next time. It's just not safe right now, I reassure him, feeling the weight of his disappointment heavy on my shoulders. As I sit on the couch, slipping on my sneakers, I catch his gaze, hoping he'll understand the gravity of the situation. If it isn't safe, why are you going then? Valentine's question cuts through the air, laced with a mixture of concern and confusion. Because I have to. I need to shift, you know that. We've spoken about this before. Sometimes mommy needs to, I explain gently, hoping he'll understand the necessity behind my actions. Fine, Valentine relents, his frustration tempered by understanding. He straightens his pencils with a meticulousness that mirrors his mother's, even extending the gesture to Carol's supplies. She frowns at his compulsive behavior, not quite comprehending his actions. You promise next time I can go too? Valentine asks, his amber eyes searching mine for reassurance. I sigh softly, nodding in response. I promise, I assure him, hoping to alleviate his disappointment. Pinky promise? He insists, holding up his little pinky. I can't help but chuckle at his earnestness, rising from the couch to join him. Our pinkies intertwine, sealing our promise with a silent vow. I pinky promise, I reaffirm, planting another kiss on Valentine's cheek before turning to Zelda. Now, behave for Auntie Zelda, and I'll be back soon. We can watch that dinosaur movie tonight if you like after dinner, I offer, hoping to lift Valentine's spirits. Ooh, and I can make caramelized popcorn, Zelda adds, eliciting excited nods from the kids. Stay away from the fence line, Zelda cautions, her concern evident in her voice. I check the clock and nod in agreement. 2 hours max, I assure her. Any longer, and I send a search party, she warns, her tone serious. I know she means it. Anxiety among us rogues is at an all-time high. With one last glance at Valentine, I make my way to the front door and descend the steps. Turning onto the path at the bottom, I head towards the back of the property, where the fence line separates us from the reserve. The hotel backs onto this sprawling wilderness, and a sizable hole has been cut into the mesh fence, providing a discreet entry point for those who work here to slip into the reserve unnoticed. The reserve, situated closer to the city's border fences, served as a wetland and held the distinction of being neutral territory. It was the sole designated area where rogues could safely shift without disturbing the established packs. However, this arrangement never sat right with me. Shifting was a natural part of being a werewolf, yet we were confined to this single location because the packs refused to share any of their secure, protected land with us. We were treated as undesirables, mere nuisances in the eyes of the city's hierarchy. Our access was limited to this one designated area, and to add insult to injury, it happened to be the most perilous part of the city. Dubbed rogue-approved territory, it stretched along the weakest, least monitored section of the border fence. It was the easiest point of entry for anyone seeking to breach the city's defenses. I made a mental note to steer clear of those fences during my shift. We all avoided them, keenly aware of the risks involved. The last thing we needed was to draw attention from the vigilant patrols or attract the unwanted interest of any potential forsaken wolves lurking in the shadows, seeking entry into the city. I had yet to encounter a forsaken wolf, and frankly, I had no desire to do so. The rumors alone were enough to instill a deep-seated fear within me, driving me to avoid them at all costs. Described as cannibalistic, rabid, and crazed, these creatures were devoid of any semblance of humanity, forever trapped in their shifted state. They were the monsters that humans once painted us to be, a chilling reminder of the prejudices we had faced. As I slip amongst the trees, I cast a wary glance around before stripping off my clothes and tucking them into a hollow log. Kneeling down, I brace myself for the arduous task of shifting. Without my mate by my side, the process had become increasingly difficult. Each transformation felt forced, unnatural, as if my body were resisting the change. With a shudder, I feel my bones begin to break, the agonizing process unfolding despite my protests. It shouldn't be this painful, but every shift seemed to mirror my first transformation all those years ago. Cursing under my breath, I surrender to the transformation, feeling my hands morph into paws, my 2 legs traded for 4. My vision adjusts and adapts to my new form, but all I crave is rest. Despite my exhaustion, I force myself to run, pushing through the weariness as I disappear into the wilderness. As I make my way back to my apartment, a whirlwind of emotions swirls within me, exhaustion, sadness, and simmering anger. Lost in my thoughts, I turn a familiar corner only to collide with an unexpected obstacle. Shock courses through me as I stumble backward, realizing there shouldn't have been anything there. I knew this neighborhood like the back of my hand. Before I can fully comprehend what's happening, a strong hand grips my arm, preventing me from falling. Startled, I gasp as warmth radiates from the contact, and my senses are overwhelmed by a familiar, intoxicating scent. His breath tickles my ear as he speaks, his voice sending shivers down my spine. "I was looking for you, and the cleaner said your apartment was." His voice trails off as he surveys the surroundings before pointing towards mine and Zelda's apartment. "This one," Brian concludes, his hand still gripping my arm. I pull away abruptly, my heart racing as I hear the distant sounds of the kids playing upstairs. Brian follows my gaze, his expression unreadable. "You live with someone?" he asks, cocking his head to the side. "Yes, Zelda and her kids." I tell him, needing him away from my apartment before Valentine realizes I am home and rushes out. "Well, are we going to stand here?" he asks, and I glance at my apartment. "I just want to talk. Please just hear me out." "We already spoke," I trailed off, stopping suddenly. Valentine is pulling the curtain back to stare out, and Zelda quickly closes it, her mouth opening and closing like a fish before she pulls Valentine away just as Brian turns to look up. He waves to Zelda briefly, and she smiles awkwardly. Yeah, fine, but my office," I tell him, walking off to the central part of the hotel before he could argue.